Welcome, viewers, to another installment of Network for New Music's Interviews with Composers. And today we have Hannah Selin. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us today. It's really great to see you, and we're really excited to have your work Prime featured on our upcoming concert, our very first one in almost 2 years.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited to hear the concert.
Great. So to introduce our viewers and audiences to you, you're really a multi-talented musician and composer, a multi-instrumentalist and vocalist and composer. You're presently in the doctoral program at Temple, is that right?
Yes, indeed. I'm in my third year there.
Excellent. And what are you doing in your third year?
A lot, a lot of teaching and also a lot of composing, trying to fit that puzzle together.
Yeah, so what courses are you teaching?
I'm teaching orchestration for the first time, and that's really fun. It's kind of like my favorite thing to possibly be teaching. And I'm also helping with a theory course, Music Theory 1.
Oh, that's great, because we'll probably touch on the topic of orchestration when we get to talking about Prime, because it's a really unique combination. Um, I,
Yeah, yes,
I was looking at your background and I noticed you have a degree in comparative literature.
I do. It's kind of buried in my distant past at this point. I didn't use I haven't used my comparative literature degree that much, but I actually have in other ways. In terms of finding texts, I'm really interested in poetry and texts and relating those to music, and also like the spoken word and using that to generate musical material.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, what was your area that you focused on, or did you have an area that you focused on for your degree?
Yeah, I was focused on French and English literature and kind of francophone literature.
Okay, any authors that we can attach onto that we could associate?
Oh, let's see. I mean, Flaubert, um,
Mhm.
Balzac,
Yeah.
um, and like poets like Verlaine, and some of the romantic poets.
Yeah.
Um,
I, my
yeah,
mother my mother owned a bookstore, and I remember distinctly one summer that I just immersed myself in French literature. Yeah, let's see, I remember reading Madame Bovary and
Mhm.
Sentimental Education all in one summer. I just went through as many French novels as I could, in translation, of course, though.
Sounds like an epic, epic summer of reading.
So you had mentioned that you're sort of interested in spoken word and how text influences. I'm wondering, how else does your comparative lit background maybe influence or inform your creative process?
I think, I've always gravitated toward the voice, and I take a lot from my practice as a violist and also as a vocalist when I'm composing, just trying to match the cadence of the human voice and then the kinds of natural things that we do that we might not be aware of that are musical or rhythmic or pitch based even.
Mm.
And I think the world of imagination and like the ability for poetry and literature to like conjure other worlds and images, and um, that kind of really colorful inner world that I've always found in literature is something that I draw from a lot when I'm composing.
Yeah, and then you mentioned you're also a singer, so I'm
Yeah.
curious. Do you write your own texts, and what kind of text do you gravitate to sing?
I'm the co-band leader of Gotta Do, which is a band. We're based in New York City. We've been playing together for about, oh my gosh, 7 years or
Hmm.
so. And we're working on our third album right now. It's actually finished. We're just doing the final touches. And songwriting for me is very personal, and it's kind of an alternative medium to concert music composing. But they certainly influence each other, and it's kind of always an ongoing dialogue. And in terms of the text and lyrics, um, I usually just work off of instinct when I'm writing lyrics. I have to say my like all of the melody usually comes to me before the lyrics,
Mm.
or sometimes they come together, but um, yeah, they're very intuitive and impressionistic based on my experiences or what I imagine other people are experiencing.
Excellent. And since you mentioned your band, Gotta Do, when does the album come out?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a date yet, so I will keep you posted.
Please do. Please do. Well, that's just one of, sort of the many aspects of your multifaceted approach to music. And you also mentioned you're also a violist. And so I had sort of a two-part question for you. I'm curious, how does performing influence your creative side, and how does composition influence your performing side?
Yeah, it's really important to me to perform and to practice and play with other people. And that's why I've really tried to continue doing that, even as I've focused more on composing over the last, decade of my life. I've gravitated toward composing, but I've continued to keep a practice and keep performing. And I think just the tactile nature of playing an instrument or singing or the feeling of the sound and the way it interacts with your body and the space and the way your mind kind of reacts to that motion and that practice and the sound, that for me, and just being with other people too and getting their ideas on music and getting the runaround of the new music scene in New York mostly, which is where I'm based, and kind of getting a sense of what's happening, what other composers are doing, and um, I learn a lot. I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Now, electronics. Also, you've written quite a bit for electronics, so I'm curious what role that has in your creative process.
Yeah, this um I started really composing with electronics, writing very kind of fringy electronic electroacoustic music. And I my undergraduate degree was in viola performance, and I was really fixated on that for most of my life until I was about 20. And then I started to compose, but by way of electronics. And I took some introductory electronic music courses when I was an undergraduate and got to play around with like modular synthesizers and kind of got my hands dirty with all these different things, was exposed to a lot of interesting, mostly electroacoustic music at that point in my life. And um, yeah, it's I think that there's a lot of dialogue for me, especially in terms of orchestrating between how I my initial experiences with using electronics and thinking about these things that are actually very orchestral from an electronic standpoint, like panning and
Mhm.
waveforms and LFOs, and like how to overlap different really simple cyclic material to generate sound. I really think about those kinds of things when I'm writing acoustic music now. But the reason I got out of just doing electronic stuff was because I really missed the human aspect of performing together with people.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what brought me back into writing acoustic, or brought me into writing acoustic music.
Right. And on the Network for New Music event, we're going to be featuring Prime, which is for percussion and bass. So I wanted to ask you, how did that piece come about?
Yeah, it's a fun piece. I usually it's on the lighter side of the pieces that I've written, I would say, and it was commissioned by Lucas Conant, who was commissioned it for his master's recital as a percussionist at Temple last year. And he really wanted to collaborate on a new piece that would involve him and another instrumentalist. And I was thinking about it, and I love the bass, and I don't know, it's not a very commonly used instrumentation. And I thought about it, and I was going to do strings, some string instrument, and percussion, and then ruled out viola because that's too familiar. and I also really had been wanting to write for the bass, and so that's how the instrumentation came together for Prime. And then, kind of separate from that, I had been thinking about cicadas, actually, for I don't know why, but I have a strong attachment to the sound of summer insects, cicadas, katydids. And I had already been kind of writing a song based on the sound of katydids and some memories associated with it. That was like over a year ago. And then I was reading about cicadas, and they have these interesting cycles that happen to have evolved into prime number um, cycles. So they hatch every 13 or 17 years in general. And the theory behind that is that it gives them the best evolutionary advantage because um, they have the least intersections with other generations of cicadas, so that each generation, when they hatch, has fewer of each other competing for food for the very short window of time after they hatch. So
Oh, that's a really fascinating concept that'll inform our listening of that. And what about just the timbre, since you had mentioned orchestration and sort of approach to sound and texture? Could you tell us anything about that?
yeah, prime. So, okay, a disclaimer about the cicadas. That was really just like where I started thinking about these prime numbers, but they have very little to do with the piece. Um, Except that maybe there's like a consistent rhythm throughout. It's a very pulsed piece.
Mhm.
Um, so timbre wise, I played around with kind of some different options for using the more edge sounds of the percussion. I used some crotales with pennies attached to them, and that gives a really cool buzz to the sound. That kind of it's very unpredictable, and it has to do with the overtones. Um, and the relationship between the bass and the percussion is often they're kind of playing off of each other, and the bass will kind of form uh, a cloud for which the percussion can rest in or kind of go through. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of rhythmic interplay.
Yeah, and for the benefit of our viewers, why don't you tell them what a crotale is?
Yes, crotales are also known as antique cymbals. They're these. I wish I had one.
They're like
They're
a
very
disc.
tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the size of this about this size. This my coaster.
Okay.
And they have like a little raised bulb on the top, and um, they can be played, I guess, by either striking them, and then they have a really sharp attack, or you can do bow on the side of the crotales. They would be like fixed on a platform, and then you would draw a bow down the side, and it produces this very pure ringing sound.
Yeah. Excellent. So anybody who doesn't know what a crotale is, please come to our concert and hear it yourself. So I noticed that you had mentioned the bass, and I noticed you're composing a bass tributaries one. Is that true?
Yes, I did actually just finish my first piece for solo double bass over the summer. And it's kind of a connecting movement called Tributaries that is part of a larger series of pieces called Pieces of Place, which are each of these pieces explores the effects of global warming on a place I've called home. And the tributaries, since global warming has so much to do with water and sea level rise, um, the tributaries imagine the connections between these different places I've lived through bodies of water.
Hmm.
So yeah, tributaries one is imagines the Susquehanna River that connects from through Pennsylvania into the Chesapeake Bay, and that's I guess that's the tributary that I'm talking about for that piece.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I also noticed too that since you brought up the pieces of place, that these are you're interested in series of pieces. So maybe something like what for past generations, sort of writing in genres like symphonies or sonatas, you develop these series. So could you tell us a little bit more about your approach to that, and how many do you envision writing?
Yeah, I love I've always my very first piece that I composed was in a series. And I've always gravitated to this because it's like a way of finding multiple approaches, like a prism that has many different sides to the same central kind of unifying idea or feeling or whatever it is, the seed for the piece. And yeah, it gives me this sense of like kind of building a community of pieces that interact with each other. And I can also invent the rules. So it's nice. I mean, it's also sometimes a challenge to decide what will be the unifying, how will they be unified or disconnected from each other. Um, and yeah, so it's just a kind of a fun tool that's I don't know, akin to writing a book of short stories or something like that.
Mm, that's fascinating, Hannah. And thank you so much for sharing with us information about yourself and about your pieces. And just want to invite the audience again to please join us on Sunday, November 7th at 3 p.m. at the Icebox Project Space to hear Hannah Selin's Prime for bass and percussion. So thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everybody for joining us wherever and whenever you are joining us. And yes, I'm looking forward to hearing the concert.
Great. Thanks again, Hannah.